Oh, how much has changed in Nigeria. 4 years after Africa's most populous nation celebrated the first peaceful defeat of an incumbent through the ballot box, it's the home stretch before another presidential election. Did Muhammadu Buhari deliver on his promise to curb corruption and defeat the radicals of Boko Haram? Enough of Buhari's supporters have defected to former Vice President Atiku Abubakar that it could all be decided in the courts. Hence, the international community's concern over the sudden corruption charges brought against the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Walter Nugan, due to appear Friday in a case brought by a longtime Buhari supporter. How free and fair will the vote be? And do either of these 70-something political veterans have the vision to lead a nation where half the population is under 18? 4 years ago, the diagnosis was clear. To tackle poverty, to stop gangs and insurgents, you needed a grand plan to spur development. 4 years on, how much has really changed? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at Nigeria's choice. And with us, joining us from Lagos, Segun Sowunmi, spokesperson for Atiku Abubakar's presidential campaign. Thanks for joining us. We'll also be joined shortly by a spokesperson for President Buhari's APC here in the studio, geopolitical strategist Emmanuel Igah, author of the Nigerian Handbook, of which you have a new version coming out soon.
Yeah, very soon.
All right.
Very soon. Thank you.
And from sister station Radio France International, Rosie Collyer. How are you?
Very well. Thanks for having me.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Friday, the suspended Chief Justice will be in court. The opposition is calling foul. And yet on Wednesday, here we saw the main candidates together pledging to respect the outcome of Saturday's vote.
Come immediately after one of the most peaceful elections in the history of our country. We are hopeful that this is evidence that we are all maturing in our disposition towards electoral outcomes.
May I freely quote the words of former President Goodluck Jonathan. I quote, and he said, "My ambition is not worth the blood of any Nigerian," and I quote.
Joining us as well for our discussion from Abuja, Ayobami Oyalowo, the head of digital media for President Buhari's APC Presidential Campaign Council. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate. First of all, Rosie Collyer, explain to us this peace pact that they made on Wednesday.
It happened as well in 2015 between Jonathan and Buhari at that time. It's actually the pet project of the US Embassy in Nigeria. They work long and hard to make sure that the candidates get together and make this peace pact because, as you said in your introduction, that, peaceful transitions to power are few and far between in Nigeria. In 2011 elections, over 800 people died. 2015 elections, at least 100 people died. And so for the Americans and the American diplomats on the ground in Nigeria, they work very hard to make sure that the candidates, shake hands and make that pact, because ultimately, unfortunately, political thuggery is still an issue in Nigeria, and the, contestation of results does lead some people to take the route of violence, and particularly in the middle region of the country, which Emmanuel can tell us more about.
Segun Sowunmi, on Wednesday you have this peace pact with the candidates pledging they'll respect the outcome, and we saw earlier this Thursday your party staging a press conference saying there were 1 million ghost votes. Will it be a free and fair election?
Now?
Can you hear me?
Now?
Yeah, it's good for us on this end. I can hear you loud and clear. Segun Sowunmi, will on the Wednesday, there's the peace pact, and on the Thursday, your party raising suspicions over, you say, are ghost voters on the rolls, and wondering about the impartiality of the Independent Electoral Commission.
Well, you see, with my party and my candidate, His Excellency Atiku Abubakar, the presidential candidate of the PDP, what we have observed from the handlers of the present government is a pattern that suggests that there's need for everybody to be nervous, especially the international community. There's need for them to be extremely vigilant. All that is at stake is for Nigeria, the biggest black country in Africa, the most populous country, to do an election that is peaceful, credible, transparent, and acceptable to all. But if you watch the body language of those that are supposed to be in charge of the country now, they have departed completely from the way the previous administration of Goodluck Jonathan did say, like with your opening comment, where he said, the blood of no Nigerian is what his victory is not worth the blood of any Nigerian. Right now, in place of that, you have rhetorics like people will be taken out in body bags, or it's a do or die, or stuff that suggests that they're not going to play by the rules. And if we're going to run an election where we have worked very hard, all of the ratings says that we're going to win, we believe that it's statistically impossible for them to be able to beat us in this election. The only thing that we're worried about is the level of honesty and the level of sincerity that they're going to display, or the freedom that they're going to allow the agencies that are going to run the elections, the security, the INEC, and everybody involved in the election, including the military and the police, to not interfere. What Nigerians expect from this country and from the umpires and from President Muhammadu Buhari is for a peaceful, transparent, credible, and fair election. So if we're raising alarm, there must be reasons for us to raise alarm. For instance, today in Kano, the police intercepted a bundle of previously printed papers indicating that APC the ballots have been printed for APC. How is that supposed to even happen? Where did they get the dump print from? What happened if the police did not intercept them? How many other such operations do we know that are snuck through the security condor that's around in the country? So, of course, we are sure we're going to win this election. We're poised to win the election, but we just want the entire international community to be extremely vigilant and to insist that the minimum that will be acceptable in Nigeria is a free, fair, and transparent and credible election.
Ayobami Oyalowo, the INEC is playing down fears over the third fire to hit an INEC station in 12 days, this one in the southeast of the country. We're hearing the president saying the government will do its best to ensure the elections will be peaceful. How free and fair a vote will it be?
Thank you for having me. In the APC, we believe in free and fair elections. We have made it a point that the voters will vote using what we call the permanent voter's card, which has a chip that a reader can use, which is called the card reader. But on the other hand, the PDP have consistently refused the use of the voter's card using the PVC. They don't want the card readers. Because in the past, what we have had is for them to sit down in a room, write the result, and tell whoever is aggrieved to go to the courts, knowing fully well that they have a way of dealing with these things illegally. But right now, the president just gave a speech. If you watch your all Nigerian television now, the president just gave a speech giving full assurances that the election will be free and fair. And we believe that in a fair and fair contest, Atiku Abubakar, with all due respect, cannot come near President Muhammadu Buhari. This is a man with baggage of a lot of corruption on his neck. This is a man who, as a civil servant, has corruptly enriched himself and his friends. And he has come back even on national television to tell Nigerians that he will enrich his friends, he will sell all national assets, as they have always done. And what are the assets? The NNPC. They have sold so many other national assets that today have become moribund. They accumulated a lot of debt behind for this government to be paying. As I talk to you right now, 20 years down the line, so many of the staff of many of these companies that Atiku and his friend stripped off their assets have been left in the lurch. Many of them have died in hunger and penury. It is this APC government that has come to start paying the pension and the gratuity of many of these staff. Many of these people are going to vote for President Muhammadu Buhari. So we are guaranteeing Nigerians that they have nothing to be afraid of. The PDP have been the one going around crying foul because they know they will lose the election. So they want to create the ground for them to discredit this election. We welcome every international observer to come and watch what we do on Saturday, February 16, knowing fully well that we have made preparations. We have given all the support to INEC. And I can assure you, this election will be free and fair, devoid of any problem, because we know that we have done what needed to be done to win an election, which is to serve the people of Nigeria in the last 4 years.
84 million registered to cast ballots this Saturday. As you've just heard from our two guests there, differing views on how free and fair a vote it could be. Earlier in the week, correspondent Anna Cunningham filed this report.
People have been queuing here since 4 in the morning. Many have been trying to pick up their permanent voter cards for weeks. But they've been told they weren't ready, hadn't arrived from Abuja, or simply couldn't be found. Scenes like this have been reported across the country.
Just look at the mammoth crowd. And people have to wait. They have to go through this just to get their PVCs. I already feel disenfranchised. And this is the struggle since on Monday. It's been utter chaos.
The UK, US and EU have already issued statements calling for Nigeria to hold free and fair elections. Both main political parties have already accused each other of preparing for electoral fraud. Collecting voter cards has not given people confidence.
It means that the election is not credible. It's not free and fair. If we're not given the opportunity to express our choice, it means that the election is not free and fair.
2015 was the first time Nigeria saw a smooth transition of power from one party to another. For some, hours spent waiting for their permanent voter cards has paid off. But many remain suspicious that this chaotic system is open to abuse in a country with a history of vote rigging.
Our votes are not for sale. We're Nigerians. Nigeria belongs to all of us, not just some of us. And so this is the time for us to make our point clear, that we are here to make our points clear. And hopefully they will take us serious this time around. And INEC needs to get the system together. The process is so chaotic. And that's where the confusion starts. Whenever you have this kind of chaos, people can get away with a lot of things.
Some 84 million Nigerians have registered to vote, but with days to go now, it remains unclear how many of them will actually be able to carry out their democratic rights.
Yeah, so questions over the vote, Emmanuel Igah. Back in 2014, just to remind our viewers, the win by Buhari was so convincing that Goodluck Jonathan quickly conceded. This time around, what happens if the vote's close?
2015?
2015, excuse me.
Yes. Buhari won with a margin of more than 2 million votes. 2.3 million or something like that. And so that was very clear-cut. And Jonathan acted as a responsible statesman and accepted defeat. That saved us a lot of trouble. I think the problem we have now is that this is a highly, keenly contested election. Because of the issues you actually raised during your introduction, Buhari made promises in terms of restoring and growing the economy, restoring security, particularly with Boko Haram, and also ensuring that there will be a better well-being of Nigerians at the end of his first tenure. And these are the questions that Nigerians are going to be asking themselves. How far did he go in delivering on these promises? And I think many Nigerians may be responding in the negative, that they haven't a better situation than they found themselves in 2015.
Buhari, in his speech, which he just gave on television, saying that the country is back on the path of steady growth after emerging from the recession in 2016.
Well, it's normal. The government will present things that way, but I think we should be looking at issues like the growing poverty in the nation. The recent reports by international organizations rate Nigeria the what now it's called the poverty capital of the world, with over 80 million Nigerians living below poverty line. There is a huge unemployment. The security, of course, President Buhari took on boldly against on Boko Haram and dislodged them from the different cities they were occupying in the northeast. But we still see that Boko Haram is there. They haven't been eradicated.
We'll talk more about Boko Haram in a moment. Rosie Collyer, I want to ask you, in 2015, Muhammadu Buhari, he had, in a way, reinvented himself because he'd been a coup leader back in the 1970s. And here he was returning as a reformer, as a civilian. It's 2019. He's a very familiar face now. And so is his opponent. One is 72, the other is 76.
Definitely. And I think that's what makes it likely to be a very close race, is the fact that they do have very similar profiles from similar genres. I say they have similar profiles. Ethnically, they're from the same ethnic group, the Fulani, or the Pearl, as call them in French. They're in their 70s, as you say, and both were very politically active during the dictatorship, while Atiku Abubakar, the main opposition candidate, we can say, worked his way up through the civil service. Then Buhari really was a military man and did well during the various military dictatorships of the 70s and 80s. And so, yeah, very familiar to the Nigerian people, but also just very similar in their kind of their personal backgrounds. And they're both from the north of the country. So Fulani's from the north of the country, and that makes it quite complicated because traditionally in Nigeria, northerners vote for northerners and southerners vote for southerners in very basic terms. But this complicates things because, as I say, both men come from the north, both men are
complicates it or simplifies it, because you can vote for things that aren't just simply your ethnic allegiance.
That is a good point. It is a good point, but
well, it simplifies things in a way, because now people should be looking at, who can deliver.
Who can deliver, and both.
Because they've had people have had time to see what Buhari can do. They have seen Atiku in action as vice president. They do know Atiku as a business person who has actually got some successes in business. They've seen Buhari too, in terms of, as this is somebody that presents himself as Mr. Integrity. He's tried to take headlong on corruption, although there is a perception that the fight against corruption has been a bit lopsided.
All right, let's bring in Sowunmi on that point, because you heard earlier Ayobami Oyalowo question the integrity of your candidate, effectively saying that he's got corruption scandals around him. Both of these candidates have a long track record. Tell us about Atiku Abubakar in relation to Muhammadu Buhari when it comes to that question of tackling corruption.
First things first, I need to say very, very clearly that one of the most irresponsible comments that anybody can make about Atiku Abubakar, His Excellency, my candidate, is to accuse him of corruption. He's a man who has been in public space for a very, very long time. He's been out of government for close to 12 years, if I'm not mistaken, since 2007. People have been in government. He's not been quiet. He's been very, very out there. He's put his views on the table. They have a lot of laws in Nigeria. There are security agencies. There's anti-corruption agencies. Not on one occasion has he been indicted, nor charged, nor invited, nor even questioned. People just build up their own stupid stories when it's convenient for them. So I won't even bother entertaining that. Nigerians know that the basic thing that Atiku is bringing to the table is very clear. Atiku is bringing a track record of being able to create jobs and eradicate poverty.
Segun, I'm going to have to interrupt you very quickly. I'm going to have to interrupt you very quickly because we have to take a very quick break, but we'll be right back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're looking at Saturday's presidential election in the giant of West Africa, Nigeria. With us to talk about it, from Abuja, Ayobami Oyalowo, head of digital media for President Buhari's APC Presidential Campaign Council. Welcome back as well from Lagos, Segun Sowunmi, spokesperson for Atiku Abubakar's presidential campaign. Geopolitical strategist Emmanuel Igah, the author of Nigeria Handbook, and from Radio France International, Rosie Collyer. Just before the break, Segun Sowunmi talking to us about what the candidate brings to the table. You know, a lot of people have been asking this question, Segun, which is, here you have two candidates, both born before independence. And we're talking about this in a country. Oh, it seems as though, have we lost the connection there with...
No, I'm here.
You're there. Okay, great. We're both born before independence, political veterans who've been around for a long time. Why is it that the old guard is squaring off once again?
Well, I think the thing is that ordinarily, after President Buhari won in 2020,
all right, we seem to have lost the connection there. We'll try to reconnect with Lagos in a moment. I'll put the question to you, Ayobami Oyalowo. You know, by some estimates, nearly half of the population of Nigeria is under 18. More than half the voters are under the age of 35. We can show up the graph on that point. Again, why is it that it's still the old guard that's squaring off in this election?
The reason is not far-fetched. You see, when we came back to this democracy in 1999, the people who took over turned it into a business venture. They stole everything, and Atiku was one of the major actors there. They sold government assets to themselves. I remember Alscon, that is valued at $3.2 billion United States dollars. He sold to his friend at $120 million. When he was asked recently on television, he said it was a mistake. And I need to explain to the man in your studio who said that he was a businessman. And you ask yourself, what business? He started Intel when he was still in government. So there are no businesses that he has started that did not have government money. So these are the challenges we have. People who have pilfered from the Nigerian people, people who have looted the Nigerian treasury, they come back as benefactors and pretend to Nigerians that they are businessmen. These are people who have never done any technical business aside from stealing from the coffers of the government and investing it in government businesses that they annexed to themselves. So I disagree that somebody is a businessman who knows business. Rather, this is an established kleptomaniac and an established thief, according to the Guardian from the UK just this last week. So we are dealing with a situation where people have cornered the wealth of Nigeria. So they are the ones who have the financial muscle. They have made politics business. That is why young people cannot aspire to position. But thankfully, for the first time in the Nigerian democracy experiment since 1999, we are having a government that, while during the election, the Nigerian International Foreign Reserve is growing rather than being depleted like they did in 2014 and subsequent, previous elections. So we might begin to have a system where money will not play all the role, because President Buhari is giving an example by ensuring that Nigerian treasury is not pilfered to give him an advantage over the other. Rather, elections are being held in a tight ship. Money is not being stolen from the government coffers to fund a personal venture in an election. So that is the reason we are having all these people, because they've amassed wealth that we are illegally gotten. Even the United States have a dossier on the candidate Atiku Abubakar. That is one of the reasons why he had to pay so much just to spend 36 hours in the US to pretend that he's an okay man. But truth be told, we have had a situation that a few of these guys have cornered our wealth, and they have made Nigerians paupers in their own land, stealing and making it look like they love us when they give a little bit of talking to the poor people who they actually want to render poor.
Let me let before I turn to our panelists on set, let me let Segun Sowunmi reply.
Times when a man has not organized his life well, And he has not been able to understand that there's life after public service and cannot transform into a businessman. It is natural for him to think that any other person that has been doing well in business probably is doing something shady. There is no evidence to the fact that Atiku has done anything shady. What we have on record is that he has been very diligent in working hard and making money and obviously getting some profit from it. It's part of enterprise, and that's one of the things he's bringing to the table. In terms of integrity, there is no iota of integrity around Muhammadu Buhari. All we see around him is that he pretends as if he doesn't see that his kids are stealing money. He doesn't see that his children, his wives are stealing. He doesn't see that his cousins are stealing. He doesn't see that his friends are stealing. He doesn't see that his appointees are stealing. Everybody steals to feed Buhari, who doesn't steal. So when you take things from a thief, you are obviously a thief. And I must also remind you that in the last election in 2015, Atiku Abubakar was with them in their party. He was funding them. He was sponsoring them. Oh, he was not a thief then. Right now, when he's back to his party, the PDP, and is being presented, he suddenly is a thief. One of the reasons why Atiku is on the ballot today is because Buhari has divided the country ridiculously, and we need somebody to unite it. And when you need someone to unite the country, you need someone that has earned the respect of Nigerians from different tribes. Atiku is at home in the Yoruba land. Atiku is at home with the Igbos. Atiku is at home with the Hausas. Atiku is at home with everybody. So it so just happens that because of Buhari's incompetence and his inability to do a proper running of the country and getting it to grow well, we are stuck with looking for one of our former leaders who has enough experience, who we trust can unite the country. And you can take it to the bank. After Atiku will be a young man in Nigeria.
Let me turn to Rosie Collyer here. A couple of points here. We heard the tone between our two panelists here, but also our correspondents on the ground tell us there does appear to be less money on the campaign trail this time around than there was in 2015. It's a different campaign.
For sure. And just to remind viewers and to inform those who don't know, over $500 million US is spent on the election in 2015. So by both parties and also the INEC to organise the election. But as you say, it's been bandied about that quite a lot less money is likely to be spent this time.
Why?
And I think thanks to Buhari's anti-corruption campaign, while there may still be theft going on in public office, I think people are a lot more wary of being caught. In 2015, in the run-up to that election, one PDP fundraising dinner raised over $100 million US. $100 million US. I think just after Christmas, there was a fundraising dinner in Lagos for the PDP. So they were the party in power at that time, and that got out onto social media that so much money had been raised just through one fundraising dinner, which raised questions.
Of course, cynics say, well, the big businesses that may have bankrolled campaigns in the past, they feel that they didn't get much return on investment if there's been a recession.
That could be a part of it. I haven't spoken very much to the business community, but that may be a part of it. But I definitely feel that the perception of Buhari being an anti-corruption crusader has scared people off raising money, at least publicly.
Emmanuel Igah?
I don't think there's actually a big gap between the amounts being spent now and what was spent in 2015. It's just that probably people are doing it in a more clever way now than in 2015. It's less open, but a lot of money is circulating in the meetings, is circulating in the marketplaces. Some of the monies are distributed very openly. People see it. So I don't think it's less money being spent. I think
and let's just be clear on something here. Money spent on a campaign trail, that's not necessarily corruption. When you print T-shirts, when you organize rallies, it's all of those sort of things. It's not necessarily vote buying.
But, you need some money. When it is, for example, a governor of a state that is taking parts of the budget of the state to plow it into the presidential election campaign,
right,
is using it to buy T-shirts and print T-shirts and actually even give money as gifts to people to buy their goodwill. That is not good. That is corruption, isn't it? So we have that actually happening across the board. I think the two parties are not the two big parties, PDP, APC. And actually, most of the people in APC went to APC from PDP. Many of them are back to PDP. You get it? So it's actually, we are dealing with actually the same political class that is dominating. And actually, what is happening now is you have money circulating, but you have it being done in a very neat way that you don't see it very openly. So what I think is that APC saying that other party is corrupt, the candidate is corrupt, or PDP saying APC is corrupt, etc. If you ask the average Nigerian in the street, he will tell you that it's just a matter of the kettle calling the pot black. It's a problem with the general political class of Nigeria.
In part one of our discussion, Emmanuel Igah bringing up the Northeast. That was the other big campaign promise in 2015 by President Buhari, which was to take on Boko Haram. Just this Wednesday, we saw an attack on the convoy of Borno State Governor Boko Haram, which now calls itself Islamic State's West Africa province, claiming there were 42 killed. Official sources put the number between 3 and 10. The insurgents managing to split the governor's convoy in two.
We just saw a Hilux heavily loaded with people in military uniform approaching our vehicle, but thank God we escaped. We then started discussing whether they were military personnel. While others did not agree, it was after we entered the town we learned that they were terrorists.
What can we say about the situation in the Northeast, Rosie Collyer?
Still extremely tentative, and it's been clear over the last 18 months that you mentioned this Islamic State in West Africa province is basically a breakaway from the original Boko Haram group. They seem to have gotten military training from members of Islamic State fleeing the Middle East, have come and given them training, and their tactic is clearly to go after military barracks and cart away heavy ammunition, in some cases armoured vehicles, and that's what they do. And they disturb them.
Kill a lot of soldiers.
Yeah, kill soldiers and target many more military personnel than civilians, whereas the original Boko Haram group, it was just to create a state of fear everywhere. The Islamic State in West African province seems to be a lot more organised and tactical. So it is a concern, and it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that Shetima's, so that's Governor Shetima's convoy was attacked. I'm even surprised that he was campaigning outside of Maiduguri, that's the capital of that state, because there's attacks 2, 3, 4 times a week. Those attacks are the ones that make it into the media. There's probably many more.
We saw successes, Ayobami, Oyalowo, after President Buhari came to power. There was, for a time, better coordination with neighboring states in taking on Boko Haram. But now you heard Rosie Collyer describe it. We've seen that spike in attacks. What's the strategy going forward?
Well, while I'm not a military man, I would say the Islamic State of West Africa has been initially they were occupying a territory as big as the size of Belgium until Buhari came and decimated them. They may be regrouping, and then the military will need to maybe redouble their tactics. But you must remember that this time 4 years ago, the Maiduguri airport was completely shut down. The El Kanemi Warriors Football Club has abandoned the Maiduguri Stadium. But right now, life is gradually returning. So, of course, when you fight a guerrilla warfare, these things don't go away overnight. I mean, we look at Somalia close by with the Al-Shabaab. They continually attack targets in Kenya and neighboring countries. So these are evolving tactics. Unfortunately, militaries over the world are not trained on guerrilla warfare as much as standard warfare. So these guys mix with the people and look for how to surprisingly attack our military. What I think we need to do is get better intelligence. But that is not to say that we have not done better than it was 4 years ago, because you will remember the United Nations building was bombed in Abuja, churches were bombed in Abuja. Right now, Abuja and its environments are at peace. At the time we could go, you could go back to Gombe, to Bauchi, to Kano, to Kaduna. They were constant attacked by Boko Haram. They were attack in Jos, in Kantagora, and in Zaria. But these are no longer happening. They have been confined to that area, and hopefully they will be rooted out. But it's going to take a while because it is not a conventional warfare. That is not to give our military credit. They have done exceptionally well in this circumstance, looking at the terrain and with the challenge of allowing it to have boomerang since 2009 that it was allowed to fester before this government started to deal with it in 2015. It's a challenge.
Let me ask Segun Sowunmi, because we're running short on time. Segun Sowunmi, you agree the situation has improved, but it is difficult when you're trying to establish a counterinsurgency?
No, Buhari has made things worse. More people have died in Nigeria than has ever died in its history as a result of insurgency. Christians are dying every day in the Middle Belt. The Boko Haram have moved from being in the northeast, it's gone to the northwest, it is now in the north central. So you have like the entire half of Nigeria under siege. And whatever it is worth, he's not been able to figure out what to do with it, to manage the military high command, to do the policing required. And more importantly, his excessive nepotism has contributed to the mismanagement of that insurgency. Before now, during the last administration of Jonathan, we had begun to take them back, we had begun to push them back. But alas, what needs to happen going forward is that the Nigerians need to go vote in a new president who has a new energy, who has the ability to comprehend what's going on, and who has the health capacity to be able to run the race and bring Nigeria back to a peaceful country. For you to make Nigeria peaceful, you need to be able to grow the economy. You need to give people jobs. You need to make them have a sense of belonging. You need to be thinking about how to give them a better structure for their own policing. Above all, you need to make sure that life is more abundant and life gets better for Nigeria. We can talk, he can say whatever he wants to say, but he who feels it knows it. We have more IDPs in this country. Nigeria is now the poverty capital of the world. The economy is not growing very well. We're practically in a recession because inflation is growing faster than the economy is growing. In all material particulars, the APC government of Buhari have failed and have failed completely. There is no way under heaven that they can statistically win this next election. And any attempt for them to rig is going to mean Armageddon in Nigeria. More needn't be said, except to say that Nigerians should go out on Saturday and go and cast their votes peacefully, and the international community should be observant. They should ensure that they can be able to see what has happened. All right,
let me bring in Emmanuel Igah on this. The north is poor. The northeast is especially poor, and we've talked about it before in fighting the insurgency. The long-term strategy for developing the northeast, has there been improvements over the last 4 years in that regard?
There couldn't be any improvements because the security situation is still not good in the north, or in the northeast, and in the central part of Nigeria. The problem we had with Boko Haram has been compounded in the past 2 or 3 years with additional insecurity from what we call the Fulani headsmen. We don't know who they are. These are people attacking actually not just in the northern part of Nigeria, but even to the extreme southeast, extreme southwest. So the general insecurity has made it very difficult to develop the northern part of the country. It's not because money is not available. Every state in Nigeria is getting its due statutory allocations from the federal government. It's just that this money comes and it cannot be used for development. So this is where we have the challenge. We had a situation, we had insecurity around Boko Haram, and now we have a generalized insecurity, not only with Boko Haram, but with the herdsmen, and generally across the country, criminality has risen with kidnappings and all that. So that is where I'm going. The problem we have to resolve now is to ask ourselves who amongst the candidates, I don't know if it is the 2 major candidates, but who amongst the candidates can deliver energetically, tackle these problems, and also bear in mind that the whole of Africa is looking at Nigeria. At this point in time, we've had elections that have gone bad in a country like the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the international community agrees on that. And we don't want a situation whereby democracy will be regressing in Africa. Nigeria has a duty to restore democracy, confidence in democracy in Africa.
It's been a little over 2 decades since democracy came back to Nigeria. How's it going on that score, Rosie Collyer? Final word.
Slowly but surely, and while there are lots of problems with the economy in Nigeria, what I've seen over the past 15 years I've been visiting the country regularly is that goods and services circulate much more freely. I think it's easier to establish business in Nigeria, especially in the urban areas. But the major divide in Nigeria is between rural and urban areas, and you even see that in the fight against Boko Haram. While the capital I spoke about, Maiduguri of Borno State, is you can go about your daily business there. Outside of the city, it really is dangerous. And the same goes for Yola. That's the capital of Adamawa State, where Atiku Abubakar hails from, where he has a number of businesses, extremely sustainable. Life is good in Yola. There's an American university affiliated to the university in Washington, the chain of American universities around the world. So Yola, quite a pleasant city to be in, but surrounding areas, poverty, and really very little in the way of a government footprint. All
right, bridging that divide between rural and urban areas, the challenge of Nigeria's next president. I want to thank you so much, Rosie Collyer. I want to thank Emmanuel Igah, Ayobami Oyalowo for joining us from the capital, Abuja, and Segun Sowunmi for being with us from Lagos. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to Simon Harding.
Good evening, Francois. Good evening, everyone. Plenty of reaction to what's going on in Nigeria, as you can imagine. And I'd like to start with a topic that you touched upon, but it's the youth in Nigeria. The BBC put out a very interesting article called "Does Nigeria's Generation Democracy Want to Vote?" Alluding to the fact that this is the first generation in Nigeria that's fully grown up and lived in a democratic environment. And it actually goes to talk about a lot of the problems and how disenfranchised they are with politics at the moment, how they're really looking for guidance at a time where they're not really getting any. This is a thought that's also echoed in CNN, who put out an article saying the old men vying to lead Africa's youngest population. So again, they seem to suggest that there is this disconnect, isn't there, with the main leaders, the main political parties vying to get into power, but also of the electorate as a whole throughout the country. And this gentleman here putting out a very simple tweet: just because you do not take an interest in politics doesn't mean politics won't take an interest in you. So it is a call to actually vote and actually do something about it and get involved and try to influence what may happen to you and what will happen in the election.
So it's a real question of whether or not people will turn out in big numbers.
Absolutely. I mean, well,
there will be a good turnout.
I think we can.
The issue is whether the votes are going to count, and that's what I think everybody's saying in Paris and the panelists from Lagos and Abuja.
We have this gentleman here who was actually at Buhari's rally and who's saying, you know, the truth is that the whole of Africa will not have another Buhari in a decade. What kind of love is this? So really a lot of praise for Muhammadu Buhari, of course, the president, and what he's trying to do and the people that he's gathered behind him. And of course, then on the other side of the aisle, we've got the main opposition candidate, Atiku Abubakar, with his slogan, "Get Nigeria Working Again," and the support that he's had. And one in particular, quite a funny group, is called the Atiku Babes, they call themselves. It's the women who are getting behind Atiku and who are really pushing for him to become president. But that leads us on to perhaps a more sinister kind of idea in the whole campaign, and it's that people are not happy with what's going on. I think this one, again, pokes fun at this idea of Atiku Babes, with the slogan, you have the two leaders vying for power on the ground, one who's talking about taking it to the next level, the other one, you'll be working again. You can see it in the cartoon. But importantly, again, the idea of youth comes back to the idea with the three boys here at the back saying, guys, it's the old man. We actually helped him win the Babes' heart in 2015. Let's take it back. So again, this idea of it coming forward.
The beginning of impatience with the old generation. Again, these are two candidates born before independence, Rosie Collyer.
Yeah, definitely. But then, I followed this Not Too Young to Run campaign that was launched by Buhari to try to encourage young candidates. And one candidate in particular in Yobe State, he basically he agreed to step aside for the old guard. And I think that's happened across the board. I think a good number of young candidates have gotten to the primaries and then perhaps money was exchanged, perhaps not, but have stepped aside.
Yeah, I think these two old candidates, in quote, emerged for this election, particularly on the PDP side, from amongst a host of younger candidates in the primaries. I think we are on the way towards a new generation. Older generations going out now from 2023.
A final word, Simon Harding?
Absolutely. Just a final word again to echo that confusion. Political party awareness poll release for the 2019 general elections. You see people with question marks on this cartoon and the direction signs with questions. So I think the overwhelming feeling that we can get from the internet, the buzz, the media, Francois, is one of uncertainty and one of doubt at the moment.
And certainly plenty of passion. Many thanks, Simon Harding. I want to thank our panelists again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.